There's Richard. All right, folks, we are going to get started. Thanks for being here this morning with us at the first session on the first day. And we're super excited about the session entitled Shared Responsibilities Driving Clean Energy Policy Transformation at the Federal, State, and Local Level. My name is Gilbert Michaud. I'm an assistant professor of energy and environmental policy at the School of Environmental Sustainability at Loyola University in Chicago. Super excited about this session in particular because I study clean energy policy and economic development largely at the state and local levels, but it's exciting to be here in DC. I'm also the policy division chair for ACES, so excited to be here where a lot of the federal action is happening, and my students got to do some lobbying yesterday, and it's been a fun conference so far. We have two awesome rock star speakers lined up for you. Sometimes I say that, and today I actually mean it. And they need very little introduction, but that is my job nevertheless. So we're first going to hear from Becca Jones-Albertus, who, among many other things at DOE, is the director of SETO, the Solar Energy Technologies Office. And I'm selfishly excited that Becca's here because I'm a recipient of a SETO grant through the SEEDS 3 program. So we're studying utility scale solar in the Midwest, and that's been fun. So great to be here with some SETO folks. And then we also have Jigar, who a lot of you probably know from various things. Jigar's also now at DOE, director of the Loan Programs Office. And I just met Jigar for the first time this morning, but I feel like I've known him for several years listening to the Energy Gang podcast, which I'm sure several of you have listened to over the years as well. So we have a little less than an hour together. I'm going to turn it over to our speakers quickly. They'll have 10, 15 minutes each to share their thoughts with you. And then we'll have a bit of a Q&A discussion, roundtable type discussion, hopefully for about 25 minutes. And then the last 5 minutes, I'll turn it back to our speakers for final thoughts and wrap up, if that sounds good. Alrighty, Becca, you were up first. So thanks for being here. Floor is yours.
Thanks, Gilbert. It's great to be here, and it's an incredibly fun time to be in solar. As those of you who have been in the industry a little while know, the last 10, 15 years have been really transformative, taking solar from a niche technology that we all were hoping was going to make a difference to the largest source of new electricity generation that we're adding on the grid each year in this country. That's been driven by cost declines, which this line on the chart here shows more than a factor of 5 reduction of costs since DOE set the first sunshot goal in 2010 to drive down the cost of solar. And we've coupled with federal, state, local policy, corporate procurement goals and renewables targets. Those things all together have driven deployment to just be feeling like it is exploding. We're going to hit 200 gigawatts of solar in this country in the next couple of months. So we're really at historic levels, with 2023 being over 30 gigawatts of deployment. Some folks still trying to decide if it was more than 32 gigawatts or not, but historic levels of deployment this year promises to be the same, and it's happening all over the country, as the plot on the right here shows. So solar today is 6% of our electricity supply and growing. We have 5 million households with solar on their roof. That's 3% of all households in this country. So these are getting to be large numbers, but they're not large enough. So now our industry's goals are not just to launch solar, to have solar really take off and become a meaningful share of our electricity, but it's to use solar and energy storage and wind and other technologies to decarbonize our economy. And there we have a lot of work to do. So President Biden set a goal of decarbonizing our electricity system by 2035, so 100% clean energy. At the end of last year, we were at 41%. We have a ways to go to get there, and across a whole variety of models. To decarbonize the grid requires 60 to 80% of the electricity to come from wind and solar supported by battery storage. That's up from just over 20% today. So we have a lot of growth to go. And while solar deployment is projected to increase over the next few years, these are the green bars, To decarbonize the grid, we need to be at these yellow lines. So the differences don't look too small over the next year or two, but they're growing over time. The good news is that we can get there. There's barriers we have to overcome. I'll talk about those in a minute. And I'm fully confident we can increase solar deployment to these levels, but it's going to take some work to get there. So the Inflation Reduction Act was an incredible policy instrument that's going to provide stable tax policy and other policy incentives for the next decade to drive an increase in deployment. But on top of that, we need to address a number of barriers. First, we really need to transform our electricity grid. From a grid today that is run on large rotating machines to keep reliable electricity system that are all on the transmission grid and supplying power to the distribution system. So we're moving to a grid that's going to be distributed with lots of generation, flexible load, storage on the distribution system. I know Jigar will talk more about the potential for VPPs, distributed power electronic space, so digital grid, and a variable grid, one where most of our energy sources are dependent on the weather, and so we need to have a lot more flexibility in the grid system to manage that. That's a wholesale change in how our electricity system works. These are engineering challenges. They're completely solvable. There's market challenges as well, but we need to address them. We need to set up the markets that drive adoption of solar and storage solutions, and then we need to get grid operators comfortable using them. We also need to improve siting, permitting, and interconnection processes. Today, there's over 100 counties in this country that have banned solar deployment over concerns about what they see going on in adjacent counties and land use. We're also seeing interconnection queues that today have enough solar, wind, and storage in them to fully decarbonize the grid. But those projects are all waiting 5 years or more to get through the queues, and only 1 in 5 of them are getting through at this point, less than 1 in 5. So we have real challenges to overcome on interconnection, on siting, on permitting, and on opening new markets is another important opportunity. Those include markets for virtual power plants. They include agrivoltaics, which is something I'm really excited about, co-locating solar production and agricultural production, be that grazing, pollinator species, sometimes crops, as new solutions, new market spaces that can further grow solar deployment. We need to build a secure domestic supply chain in this country, which Inflation Reduction Act incentives coupled with trade policy and work that Jigar's team are doing is definitely supporting that, but we need a secure domestic supply chain to supply all the equipment for the plants we're building. We need workforce training. We're going to add hundreds of thousands of jobs in the solar industry. And so we need to have skilled workers ready for these jobs, and we need to ensure that all people, especially those who live in under-resourced communities, have access to the training, have the ability to join this growing workforce. And we need to continue to have a focus on equity. In CEDO, we do this through much of our programming, but one big strategy we have to ensure that the benefits of solar deployment reach all households is through community solar. So today in most parts of the country, you can save money if you put solar on your roof. And you can increase your energy resilience if you add storage. But if you don't own a home, if you don't have a suitable roof, like half of households in this country, you don't have the ability to, if you don't have access to good financing, you can't put solar on your roof and access those benefits. But community solar, especially community solar that is rooted in your own community as opposed to somewhere else in your state, community solar rooted in your own community can bring resilience benefits, can bring the opportunity to save money just like it's on your own roof. And so that's one of the ways that we're really trying to work to ensure that the benefits of solar deployment can reach all households. We also need to continue to improve technology while also thinking about what happens when these systems come to the end of their life, which is hopefully a good 50 years from when we install them, but we need to be ready to recycle these panels and deal with other end-of-life issues. So the solar office at DOE, we're trying to work on addressing all of these challenges. So my office focuses on advancing solar technology and accelerating deployment. We do this by driving innovation in technology and in soft cost reduction, so working on these challenges like siting, permitting, and interconnection. We focus a lot on how solar and energy storage can support the reliability, the resilience, and the security of the grid, as well as how we can bring job growth, manufacturing, and other benefits to this country as we scale up solar. So I'll end these slides just with a couple of opportunities for our office. First, I always have to share we have fellowship opportunities, which are a great way for recent graduates and others who are looking to make a change in their profession to come work on some of the biggest challenges facing our time at DOE. We have a deadline in July 15th for those fellowships, and would love for any of you who are interested to talk more, help us share the word. We have also three opportunities open right now. The first is just due in a few days is our photo competition, where you can win a couple $1,000s for having best pictures of solar in a few different categories. We have open funding for photovoltaics research and development, as well as projects working on siting at the state level. And then up here I have our newsletter and funding opportunities for DOE's Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, which are great ways to stay in touch and learn about other funding as it comes out. We have different programs and funding opportunities that are coming out all year round. So the best way is to get on our newsletters to stay in touch. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jigar.
Thank you. In 1996, I went to my first Solar Power International conference and picked up a copy of the magazine that was being offered for free outside. And it was the membership directory. And I think there were 100 members of the Solar Energy Industries Association. And when you think about how far we've come in that short period of time, where Becca is now announcing that we are now the largest deployer of new technology, new electricity generation equipment onto the grid, and have been since 2016, 2017. So it's really been an extraordinary effort, and for many of the friends who are in this room that I see, it's been your effort that has gotten us to where we are today. So first, thank you. It was not easy in 1996 to be working in the solar industry. Most people had to have part-time jobs to support their solar habit back then. Today, it's an extraordinary thing to see where we are. One of the things I would say is interesting about this particular moment is that for 20 years, we haven't really had load growth in this country. Energy efficiency has been so successful that we've largely sold the same number of kilowatt hours. Even last year, we sold roughly the same number of kilowatt hours that we did in 2003 as a country. Today, things are changing, right? Electric vehicles are taking off, heat pumps are taking off, hyperscale data centers. There's so much onshoring and reshoring of manufacturing that's happening. And people are now saying, even if you cut down the 7% load growth that people are projecting down to 2.5%, that still doubles electricity in this country by 2050. So when you think about what that means, the people of the solar industry have been spending a lot of time on how the grid works and how something that doesn't rotate fits within the grid for a very long time, right? So when you think about figuring out how you actually sync inverter-based systems within the grid, how inverter-based systems might participate in black start opportunities. When you think about where we are on battery storage, all of that sits on top of the expertise from the solar industry that has been working on it for a long time, working with IEEE standards, working within a lot of these other places. Today, we're at a very critical moment, right? Our grid that we've already paid for is down to about 40% asset utilization from around 70% asset utilization in the 1970s, right? That means that we pay for all these things and we don't use it that often, right? It's not a coincidence that the EPA regulations came in at this sort of 40% magical threshold, and that's because most natural gas units in this country run at 37% capacity utilization, right? And so when you think about where we are today, we have an asset that is really cool, right? That could be put on rooftops, et cetera. And it doesn't actually have a problem that it is solving, right? The problem that it's solving is people want lower electricity bills, or people want to, free themselves from the grid or whatever it is. But it is not directly designed to help your neighbor in the case of congestion on your distribution circuit, right? It's not directly designed to work if everyone plugs in their electric vehicle at the same time, or everyone turns on their thermostat and turns on their heat pump to alleviate congestion in the distribution circuit. So as a result, we're actually increasing the capacity of every distribution circuit in this country, right? So we're saying, I don't know, people might come home and want, a comfortable house and plug in their electric vehicles. So therefore, we're going to put another $100 million into upgrading that distribution circuit, right? And so one of the challenges that we have in this unique moment in time is figuring out how to make all of the work that you guys have all done, that we've all done for 40 years, and make it relevant to this moment, right? Because raw kilowatt hours in the middle of the day from, 10:30 to 2:30 is not what we need today, right? We've already been so successful that in many parts of the country, we're sort of being 100%, solar powered in April and October. And so we're now in a situation where we need to figure out how to shift those electrons, right? And how to use those electrons in a way that actually allows us to use more of the capacity we've already paid for, right? And the weird thing is that you guys have already solved all those problems 15 years ago, right? It's just not something that policy has paid for, right? So when you think about where we are today, we have clunky policy, right? So whether it's NEM 3.0 in California, or whether it's the work that Puerto Rico is doing today with LUMA on virtual power plants and some of that work, or whether it's the work that Rocky Mountain Power is doing in Utah, all of that work is, frankly, very clunky, right? And so part of my challenge to you is to figure out, for this next generation of research, et cetera, is to figure out, yes, we need to continue to do the work on making solar more, efficient, making conversion efficiencies better, doing all those things. But honestly, the solar panel is becoming a vanishingly small part of the cost of a system, right? So when you think about, all of the metrics that we use, it's $3 a watt to install solar. Fine, but then the battery is another $14,000, right? And so when you add all this stuff up together, the solar panel is less and less relevant from a cost perspective, right? What matters now is the software, the dispatch, figuring out how to integrate within grid operations, figuring out how to take signals in from the grid operator. Many of you guys may have seen that there are folks on Tesla Electric now in Texas where when the wholesale market price goes to $5,000 a megawatt hour, they're able to sell back into the grid and make money. They've got negative $600 bills, right? And they're helping their neighbor while they do it, right? And so part of my challenge here is that the solar industry, the rooftop solar industry, let me qualify that, is stagnating, right? We're at, whatever the volumes are today. They might be growing a little bit, but they're not really on track to realizing their full potential. And I would suggest to you that if they are going to realize their full potential, they have to be viewed as an essential solution to the problem of the day, which is load growth and how we get more out of what we've already paid for, right? And so with that, I'll leave it there and take your questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Becca and Jigar both. We're doing pretty well on time, so I want this to genuinely be your session. I'll help moderate and call on folks, but we got about 30 minutes to field any questions for our panelists. I'll give you the mic here. Gentleman in the back.
Good morning, Becca. Good morning, Jigar. Thank you for speaking. Jigar, I haven't seen you in many years. It's Ben Luce from New Mexico. I just wanted to tag off of what you just said. There's a concept that Mark Perez and other people have been developing. It's called implicit storage. And the idea is precisely because solar is so cheap now and batteries are still pretty expensive, if you simulate the grid, you find that if you overbuild the solar and allow it to curtail sometimes, your ability to get to a high solar fraction at a minimal cost is much greater. But this concept of overbuilding is something that's a little bit anathema to all of the of us who have worked on net metering all these years. A lot of solar installers just instinctively size at load. The concept hasn't gotten a lot of publicity. I don't know of any policy that really embodies that. And I'm wondering if you could comment on that and if that's something you guys are looking at.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think about curtailment as like a dirty word. It's not a dirty word. What we really want is to be maximizing the amount of solar we put on the grid, and some of the times the best way to do that is to overbuild. And small parts of the year you're curtailing it, but then in other parts of the year you're actually producing more overall. But I think what you're also getting to is part of changing how we operate the grid is dynamically controlling the output of our solar energy systems. So today, the way most markets and contracts are set up is that when somebody builds a solar plant, they have contracted that energy to meet someone's renewable energy goals. And therefore, they want to maximize the amount of energy that they put out to the grid. That's not the best outcome for the grid in many cases. In many cases, especially when you're in April and operating, potentially the grid on 90% solar, you need to be able to dial the solar up and down as the load goes up and down. But that means, on average, you're going to produce a little bit less energy, so a little bit less renewable energy credits for whomever you're giving them to, but you're going to have much better outcomes for the grid and overall going to allow more solar energy plants to be deployed. So it's a really important paradigm. I think it's critical we shift there as soon as possible to enable more solar deployment, but it's hard because every next plant that's going on the grid doesn't want to be the one that makes less money than all the others who were able to just sell all their energy. And so the near term ones, everybody's still trying to be able to sell all their energy. But I think, 5 years from now, we're going to be at a paradigm where solar plants have to be controllable like other power generators. And that means they have to sell a little bit less energy in order to enable more solar on the grid overall.
Anybody else want to jump in? And if you could say your name and affiliation, that would be appreciated. There's a gentleman over here, please.
Hello, everyone. Jordan Crawley here, energy engineering consultant with Answer Advisory. My question is related to energy efficiency, but not specifically. Like, we've been talking about energy efficiency first for a long time. What's the equivalent of that with energy storage? Like, what's the best way to be moving load and trimming peaks that isn't batteries? Like, talk to me about that a little bit.
Sure.
So first, let me just address energy efficiency because I feel like, facts matter. In general, people don't do energy efficiency first, right? So let's just be clear, right? People do standards, and then standards results in 1/17 of everything being replaced every year, and so things get magically more efficient over time as people replace old stuff with better stuff. I think, and it's important for us to recognize like the role that we play, because I do think that today we're sort of suggesting that we might need to install something that generates power at 12, 13, 14 cents a kilowatt hour, whether it's nuclear or advanced geothermal, instead of doing energy efficiency. So I think there is a conversation to be had there. I think on the battery storage side, I think it's related to the curtailment piece, right? I mean, ultimately, if sometimes this stuff gets pretty abstract. Let's just take NEM 3.0 in California. If you have NEM 3.0 in California, by definition, if you don't actually figure out a way to empty your battery, right, in NEM 3.0 by 10 in the morning, well, then there's no place for the other electrons to go. You're sort of forced to either sell it to the grid at 7 cents or spill it, right, curtail it. And so in general, then someone says, well, I don't want to spill that power every year. Maybe I should put in a second battery, or maybe I should get Enphase IQ8, and I should figure out when my loads turn on so that they're turning on at the exact right time, right? And then maybe I should get an electric vehicle and figure out how to do it that way, right? And so all of this is the same, right? And so I would say curtailment is the same, right? Which is that we should be speeding up interconnection onto the grid. Curtailment is a feature by which to do that, right? So you can say, yeah, you can you can connect, but if there's no capacity on the grid, well, then you're going to have to curtail, right? That's fine. You get approved, you get installed. And then you might say, well, that doesn't work for me economically. Now I'm going to put in Form Energy's long duration energy storage. Because one of the things that I find troubling in this time, which I think is something that all of you really are responsible for figuring out, is that as we blend between technology and finance, right? Solar has largely become a finance industry. We sort of forget about laws of thermodynamics. Like the thing that is the most crazy to me is I get called all the time around those thermal heat batteries. You guys looked at this, like Rondo Energy and some of the other ones. And they're like, but Jigar, if we've got really cheap power in the middle of the day, we should just turn it into heat. And I was like, let me help you understand how this stuff works, right? You have a product that's at $25 a million BTU. And right now it's selling for negative $5 a million BTU. Therefore, you're going to turn it into something worth $3 a million BTU? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, right? Why wouldn't you put it into a battery? You have a 40% round trip efficiency and you're selling it back out at $16 a million BTU, right? Of value at the time at which it's valued, right? And the same thing's true for all these things, right? Now there's a capital cost associated with buying a Form Energy battery or buying a lithium ion battery or buying a zinc halide battery, whatever. So over time, you're going to actually have to factor in that capital cost. But these curtailment things are never permanent. They're just for now, because that's the lowest cost approach, right? And then over time, you're like, I got these kilowatt hours. I'm either going to shift load into those periods, make Bitcoin, and then kidding, and then you're going to put in batteries or whatever it is you're going to do, right? So that's sort of how I think about these things.
Yeah, and I'll just add, we're trying to make the clean energy transformation as affordable as possible, and battery storage is not the cheapest option out there. It's not necessarily energy efficiency. It's actually finding flexible loads and shifting them to the time when we have excess solar. So EVs are easiest there, but we can be smarter with our air conditioning systems and our heaters and setting them in ways that can better sync with when we have energy. And so I think better control systems are basically free and are cheaper than battery storage. You can use less battery storage, more control systems is more of the ideal. We'll still need battery storage. But I think there's a lot we can do with flexibility.
Let's go to the gentleman in the red shirt, please.
Yes, sir. My name is David Comas. I work at the Maryland Energy Administration. I'd like to talk a little bit about the coordination of energy use. You're talking about software as being the next way to go run the grid. And in my master's thesis, I took a look at the electric vehicles and when to charge them. And the thing I came across is if you can develop vehicles that all you have to do is tell them when they need to be charged and let some computer, 486 is all you really need in order to coordinate the charging on this transformer or coordinate the charging or the energy uses at another transformer. That requires home energy management systems. You don't see that being done much anymore or by the DOE at all. Could you talk a little bit about this idea of coordination of load use, which is very different than a VPP, as far as being able to go more efficiently use the grid, which would allow solar to be used better?
So in the state of Maryland, they have pilots with both WeaveGrid and Energy Hub for exactly this, and they don't require home energy management systems, right? And so GM Energy, Ford Energy, like Tesla, et cetera, have APIs for their cars. And so you can absolutely opt in. And Pepco offers that, right? So it's like a 20% discount on your, sort of EV charging if you opt into these programs. And so it doesn't actually require like Google Home or Alexa Home or anything else. You just do it through the EV charging platform. And so the car software itself turns on and off the charging. It's not actually the charger, it's the car itself that turns itself off and on. And it can be tied to whatever rule set you give it. So if you say, charge when there's excess capacity in the grid, if you say charge when there's extra solar, right? Whatever it is that the rule, and that rule set can be changed regularly. There's a docket in front of, our friend Fred Hoover and Kumar Barve there at the Public Service Commission now to increase the pilot to a full-blown program. So, we're providing technical assistance from DOE to the Public Service Commission of Maryland to help them like get that completed, right, and get that approved. But I don't know what the name of it. The two companies that they've hired is WeaveGrid and Energy Hub, and so those are the companies that Constellation and or BG&E and Pepco have hired to run those programs. But this is something that is happening regularly, like Duke Energy and NextEra, Florida Power and Light are now they'll put in the level 2 charger for you now in your home, and I think it's in Duke's territory, it's like $20 a month or something for unlimited charging, up to 10,000 kilowatt hours or something. But there's like 4 hours a day that you can't charge. You can plug it in, but it just won't charge, right? Like, and they pick which 4 hours of the day it is each day. So I do think that this is coming and can be done rather independently of the home energy management systems.
And I think what's going to change is that before this was ways to keep the grid make the grid marginally cheaper, save a little bit of money for households. As we're going to get into this time frame of significant load growth, there's going to be opportunities or like a need for these systems to really have much higher use in order to keep our electricity prices affordable. And so that, I think especially with EVs coming online, we're going to see more and more use of these systems. We're going to need to in ways that haven't been needed before. And a lot of these have just been demand response programs in the past, and now they're going to need to be day in, day out flexibility programs that keep our electricity grid affordable. So I think we're going to see a lot more use over the next several years as we get in a paradigm of load growth.
You're not going to get the mic, Yogi.
We'll come back to you, Yogi. Jay, please.
Yeah, Jay Warmke with solarpvtraining.com. And since we're talking about regulatory a bit, I was just wondering, I was involved in the telecom industry back when it transitioned from Ma Bell. It feels to me as we're going to begin to see the Magnificent Seven, the Silicon Valley people, identify energy as the next great frontier, and we'll see a regulated and a deregulated energy marketplace evolve. And I'm just wondering if there's any serious discussion about completely overhauling the 18th century regulatory system that we have in place for energy to deal with the technology that's coming as the system is revised.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's going to be a wholesale restructuring of the Federal Power Act or PURPA, like which I think is what you're suggesting. But I do think that, as Becca was suggesting, that today the two pillars of regulation are really around figuring out generation and figuring out transmission distribution, right? the visibility on the load side of things is purposely blind, right? It's the load can do whatever it wants, and generation and transmission distribution have to be able to accommodate whatever the load is doing. The goal here, I think, is to create an equal third pillar of regulation and technology deployment, such that you're flexing load with the same level of dexterity that you currently only flex supply, right? And the reason you do that is because it's 90% cheaper to do that than it is to build new natural gas peaker plants that are running 9% of the time. And so so that I think that is the goal of what we're doing now. But I don't I don't know that the Federal Power Act or any of those things will be reformed as a result.
Let's go over here to Yogi, please. Yeah.
I don't know whether Becca or Jigar, one of you said that we have been doing things and saying things for a long time, and some of those things have been done and some not. Back in 1991, I gave a testimony to the Energy and Water Subcommittee of the Congress on behalf of all of the engineering societies. And I said, I welcome the research money you are putting in solar energy. But remember, we can't forget energy storage. That was in 1991. I said that we've got to keep funding development of energy storage. And that doesn't just include electrochemical storage. It includes all kinds of storage. And my message today is also the same, that we need to keep looking at that and not exclude any of the energy storage, because in some cases, battery storage makes a lot of sense. But in other cases, it may not be the best storage. So from the CETO side, please keep that in mind. So that we keep not just developing, but keep demonstrating that also, so that becomes part of the solution.
Definitely agree, although I think battery storage is going to get us, 80% of the way there, but we still need the other 20%. We'll need other technologies as well.
Right behind you, please. Yeah.
Hi, Ruth Amundsen. I'm from Norfolk Solar. I'm a solar developer. I have two questions. Sorry, but the first one's fast. I'm from Virginia. When are these vehicle-to-grid, vehicle charging things going to move to other states? I would love to be able to have my vehicle be part of the grid with its battery. And my second question is, I went to the Capitol yesterday, talked to my legislator, and one of the things I feel like is the elephant in the room is that the U.S. is still giving almost $1 trillion a year to fossil fuel companies as subsidies. And that's a lot of money we could be using for renewables. That's a lot of people kept invested in the fossil fuel field that we could be retraining and using for renewables and for the grid. And when are we going to have the political will? And how do all of us go talk to our legislators and stop fossil fuel subsidies?
I can start. Look, I think Virginia is a very interesting place, as you know. The way this stuff works in general is that folks want affordable electricity bills, right? And so the vehicle to grid stuff has been in in demonstration and now deployment for years, right? I mean, Willett Kempton was doing a lot of this stuff back in 2008, 2009. Today, I'd say a lot of that technology is now mature. You're starting to see it being rolled out in other states. Many states that are like Virginia, right? So in North Carolina or Florida, where you actually have strong utilities that and sort of semi-weak regulators that are doing this stuff. So I think there is a pathway by which vehicle to grid happens in Virginia, and frankly, we've been very engaged with the current administration just around using a lot of the Inflation Reduction Act monies, and they've been quite receptive. So I don't think that they're as sort of brick wall necessarily around vehicle to grid. On the fossil fuel subsidy side, remember that the goal of all of these subsidies is to figure out how to make energy more affordable for for Americans, right? I mean, that's the goal of all of it, right? And so the question that we have to ask ourselves is, now that we're big, because we are big, right? We're now whatever 60% of everything we add to the grid every year. How do you act like you're big, right? And that means something different than it did 20 years ago when we weren't big, right? And when you look at the historic amounts of investment that the solar industry puts into trade associations or into some of these other things, it's really low compared to other energy sectors, right? And so in terms of how you build power, how you build some of these like muscles, folks have to recognize that technology is not enough, right? We've got our technology to this point and we're going to keep going, right? We're going to keep investing in more technology and more breakthroughs. But at some point, it can't be the case that your elected officials have no idea how like AC and DC work. It's not just a heavy metal band. There's something there, right? And so there is a responsibility that all of the folks in the industry have. The part that, you know, like the analogy I'd give you is, I don't know if you ever watched that show, King of the Hill, right? And that guy basically sold propane. And every place he went, he was selling propane, right? Like kid's birthday party, propane, whatever else. When most of you like have a birthday party you go to and someone says, what do you do? Most people say, I work in the energy industry. That's not really like the way you win this battle, right? You gotta say, I work in, you know, the future of energy, right? Like I'm not working in the past, right? And that's just not how we're wired, right? We're all very humble, like we don't talk about it much. Our neighbors don't know what we do. I mean, that's got to change if you want to make the changes that you want to make.
I think we have time for maybe one more question. Someone over here in the blue shirt, please. Yes.
So thank you. Patrick Thompson, work for several renewable energy companies, including TerraScale. So I work a lot with companies that are not here and companies that are in other grids overseas. What I don't see is the problem of grid connectivity, because some of those countries, sometimes you talk to them and they have one utility. That's it. So that has problems too, but at least you don't have this patchwork of things. We're all, as an industry, wasting time and money trying to help people understand how things work who don't really want to understand. How much money can you give me is the question. We're not getting through this patchwork. Nothing. What is the incentive for my utility to work on the grid? It's not. I know where I am, we have gotten about as efficient as we can. Consumers have bought into efficiency. They've done all that. Now we're being told that, I mean, a year later, after they're giving us accolades for efficiency from the utility, they're saying, we need more capacity. It isn't that stuff has increased. It's just that they're adding stuff that we have no control over. So for example, in my area, we're very popular with the data centers and cryptocurrency centers. That has nothing to do with the consumer. It is not offering business. It's not building business. It's just a place that runs computers. It doesn't do any good, but we have to pay for it. So somewhere in there, somebody at the top has to say, if you're going to do that, you got to pay for it. That is not being done today. It's all being meted out. As we build this thing, we build this industry, we're having to fight these pitched battles every day because no one's been told. Thank you for putting some money into the siting and permitting thing. It's just ridiculous. Why is that there? Why is that not national policy? Here's the way you do this. Go do it. I know everybody's different, but if you want to remain different, you're going to have to go by certain guidelines. We just don't see it today. Everybody's trying to invent this, and there's no guidance. I wish that had been in the IRA, some training. I see you have some ideas, gathering ideas for that, but it's not streamlined. So look at the people in this room. we are with you. We're trying to do the best with the money we're getting, but we're wasting money on all this stuff that really doesn't matter. It's just a message to you. I hope you guys have ideas. I know, Rebecca, you do.
I mean, we've thought about this for a long time. You go to Australia and it costs $1 a watt to put solar on your roof. It's less than a third the cost to put solar on here. Why? Because you don't have to get a permit and interconnection is really easy. And why? Because their regulatory authorities are either nationwide or they've got, 2 for the whole country. That's not the United States of America. We don't have counties and cities that want to give up their permitting authority and say, yes, let's have the U.S. regulate me at the federal level and tell me what I should be doing in my community. Like that's not how we're wired, and I don't think we're ever going to get there. We're not going to have a national permitting policy just for solar because we're in a climate crisis. At least I don't see that anytime soon. But we do technology well. We can develop automated tools. We're supporting automated permitting tools, and you still got to get jurisdictions to sign up for them. And there's 10,000 of them, and we're at a couple hundred with our solar app product. It takes time, and that's why it takes all of us working hard and working with our neighbors and working in our communities, because I don't think the regulatory landscape is going to change, and it makes it substantially more challenging. But we can still get there. We've just got to keep, as Jigar was saying, we got to be working with our communities, working in with our neighbors, sharing these challenges, and then working with our local regulatory authorities.
And the one thing I would say is that the operating engineers, Loyola and IBW, came out with a tri-party PLA. Every single group that has signed that PLA has gotten their permitting and interconnection done quickly. I mean, I don't know why this industry is anti-union, but at some point they're going to have to figure out how to win. So, work on it. On the data center side, look, these are all governing bodies, right? Whether it's the rural electric co-op or the municipality or other things, right? For a long time, people wanted data center loads because they offered property tax income locally without any real other infrastructure costs. Today, that's not the case, right? And some utilities are still providing them subsidized power as an industrial rate. That's changing. So Department of Energy has funded work at the Regulatory Assistance Project. So there's a 24/7 tariff at rap.org, I think is their website. So you can download that tariff and folks can implement it. We are seeing a huge backlash across the country for data centers broadly and Bitcoin miners, and folks are saying if you want power, you should pay for 100% of your cost to the system. And that is coming in at between $100 and $120 a megawatt hour for them. So they are starting to feel that. And we're facilitating that conversation regularly. But, old habits die hard. A lot of folks, just sort of blindly do that stuff. So I think it is important for you to talk to your utility to say, look, this is not fair, right? We shouldn't have 6% rate increases because you want to give a discount to a data center. And for most of these data centers, electricity cost actually doesn't matter. Their margins are pretty high. So there's a lot to do, but I would say that there are solutions to the problems that we face. I think in general, we, haven't necessarily decided that we wanted to adopt solutions that work. We're sort of like, why don't we continue to try the things that don't work and see if they have different results? I would suggest to you that's insanity, but you should, see what works for you.
Alrighty, folks. Thanks for your sustained engagement and really thoughtful questions. We have just a couple minutes left, and I wanted to give the final word to our two inspiring speakers in 30 seconds or less, if you can. We'll start with you, Becca. What are your sort of synthesizing takeaways? What are the maybe one or two quick key points you want folks to walk out of here with?
Yeah, I think for any of us who've been in this industry a couple of decades or more, we have to pause and just think about how much progress has happened and what what really incredible things we've accomplished. and then double down and realize we have so much more work to do to decarbonize our electricity system, which is the linchpin of addressing climate change for our economy. And that means focusing on new and different challenges. It's no longer just bringing costs down through advancing technology. We've got to get communities engaged. We have to spread information about what benefits come from new solar energy projects and putting solar in your home. There's the siting piece. It is an enormous challenge, and transforming the grid are other enormous challenges. We need more power systems engineers. So we need all of you to continue doing the amazing work you're doing, but also to get our young people, to get more and more folks involved in this industry and involved in their communities, because a lot of this is at the local level, as we've just been talking about, and it takes local decisions by your state PUC or your local permitting board. Are going to make huge differences, and having folks understand how how solar can benefit them, benefit their own lives and their communities, can make, all the difference in how much we accelerate deployment.
Thanks. And Jigar?
I'll just agree. Deploy, deploy, deploy.
Enough said. Thank you all for a great opening session to kickstart our day. Thank our speakers.